being underground forever, never.
Hollywood, the lights that shine around. I won't go Hollywood. You need to calm down. I wanna be one of the greatest. Everyone telling me I won't make it. When the dust begins to fade, I'll be the only one standing. I wanna be one of the baddest ones around. I wear the crown, king of the town, ready to pound.
Welcome to the Fit for the Kingdom podcast. You're here today with your host, Pete Alexander, missing Matt Mashevsky, Thomas Moneska-Son.
The Protein Brothers are running solo.
It's the Protein Brothers show today, really, to be honest. We also have Ben and Eliza McCabe joining us. They're all the way from Australia and they're here for a liberal arts week. So we feel very blessed to have them on the podcast with us today. It was a bit impromptu. I went to a liberal arts kind of introduction night with them last night, and I thought they were perfect people to have on the podcast. So do you mind introducing yourselves?
Thanks, Speed. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and talking with you today. So I'm Ben McCabe from Australia, and here with my lovely wife, Eliza.
I'm Eliza McCabe. I'm also obviously from Australia, and we have our little daughter Indigo over in the corner of the room.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, let's start with the Hail Mary and then we'll go into it. All right, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Hail Mary,
full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Right, in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Right, so I guess I was pretty blessed to kind of hear a bit of your guys' story last night, but I thought that now would be a good opportunity to give a little bit more of a background on your childhood. You know, Eliza, you didn't grow up Catholic, did you?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so I think that for listeners, that's a pretty cool story to be able to hear, and I guess Ben's upbringing as well, what brought him to Campion College and what brought him to start founding a school.
Sounds good. Yeah, who would you like to go first?
Yeah, no,
where does the story begin? Where does it start with?
Yeah, good question.
Could go either way. You go first if you want, Eliza.
So I grew up in the snowy mountains of Australia, a little place called Jindabyne.
Where is that in Aussie?
Town. It's 4 hours south of Sydney.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, in New South Wales. So I grew up there doing a lot of skiing, snowboarding as a kid, hiking, things like that. So pretty adventurous childhood. I was always a lover of nature and beauty. And I think that's kind of probably what sparked my love of God as well, and my love of the liberal arts in particular. And then I moved to the coast when I was a young kid, a little place called Wollongong, which is only an hour south of Sydney, and fell in love with the beach, still very in love with the beach. There's a lot of natural beauty there, obviously. And yeah, my family are not religious, any of them. That I know of. Maybe they are secretly, inwardly, but not explicitly religious in any way. I didn't really grow up around any religion at all until high school. I went to a Catholic all-girls high school. Mainly, I'm not really sure why. My sisters went there, but I could have gone to the public school. That was an option, but I liked the idea of going to an all-girls school, I think. So I went there, but I didn't really learn anything about the faith at high school, which looking back on is surprising. I obviously didn't.
Shocker
not that surprising.
Not really that
nowadays.
surprising.
No, I guess not. But and I obviously didn't really care when I was in high school that I didn't learn anything about the faith then. I didn't really know what the faith was. But in high school, my best friend for pretty much my whole schooling time there was a Catholic, a very committed Catholic. And so that's kind of where I first learnt about Catholicism. And we'd have long lunchtime chats about God and about what it meant to be Catholic and what Mass was. And I joined her a few times going to Mass because I was curious. I was always very, very curious. It was never something that kind of turned me off, I don't think, religion in any way. And that's probably partly due to my family. They're very open-minded people. They'd never talked badly about religion or tried to deter me from exploring that at all. they've always been super supportive of that. And then I guess, gosh, my path wasn't linear. Started uni, I did half of a medical degree and then a bit of a law degree.
So where did you start studying first?
Yeah, Wollongong University for the medicine stuff, and then Notre Dame University in Sydney.
Okay.
Which is kind of another, I suppose, prompting from God. I feel like God was kind of almost holding my hand the whole time. Like Catholic high school, Catholic best friend. And then for some unknown reason, I still don't really know why, I chose to go to Notre Dame University, which was a very Catholic university. And it was an hour from where I live, so it wasn't the natural option to go there. But I kind of just went to an open day and explored it, and it felt like home. The people felt like home as well. The big Catholic community there felt, just, I don't know, the kind of environment I thought I'd flourish in.
Yeah. So Notre Dame, what do they offer? All kind of degrees, or what do they sort of specialize in specific ones?
No, they offer everything. But they're very known for their philosophy and theology degrees.
Okay.
So if you want to do really good philosophy and theology, you go to Notre Dame or Campion.
Yeah, I heard you last night had a little, or do you call it a dig, or was it more just like Notre Dame's better?
It's definitely a rivalry. It's still a rivalry between Ben and I as well. I don't know. I love Notre Dame and I'm very loyal to it, but obviously Campion's great as well.
So how far away are they from each other in terms of?
1 hour.
1 hour, so they're not too far.
No.
So did you study at Campion, Eliza?
No, I didn't. Right. No, just Notre Dame. Yeah.
It seemed to turn out all right. So.
It's definitely a rivalry. We fight about which uni our students should go to. Not really fight, just jokingly fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did a bit of law at Notre Dame, and then that didn't suit me either. And so I chose to just do philosophy, which I'd not really ever heard of before, but it kind of sounded like the thing you do when you don't know what you're doing. And it is exactly that, I would say. But yeah, I fell in love with it straight away.
So was there, like, in terms of when you were deciding with philosophy, was like there anything that specifically stuck out to you about like philosophy? Was it like they were talking about the syllabus, or were they was there anything that really hit you and was like, oh, this is what I want to do? You know, obviously you were unclear about those other things.
Yeah, I think the way it described probably asking the big fundamental questions of life was something I'd kind of always done and been interested in. I grew up loving books. I was a very curious kid, and so it seemed to suit me, or suit my nature at least, to be able to question things. I liked questioning things. I loved arguing, which is why I did law in the first place. And philosophy was also good for that, obviously.
So that's obviously, in terms of, for someone who's coming from a secular background, it's not all that, I guess, normal to be challenging, because I feel like we live in a society where challenging social norms is something that's, I guess, frowned upon. So was that something that you felt was encouraged, maybe even within your own family, or was it just something that you feel like was just within you, that you always had to keep pushing the boundaries of what you were thinking and the way you acted and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think it is to do with my upbringing. My mom in particular, she basically raised me and my brother on her own, my brother and I on our own, and she was super encouraging of thinking for ourselves, thinking critically. She never told us what was right or wrong. She kind of refused to do that. I even remember as a little child not ever being told what was right and what was wrong. I had to figure it out for myself always. And I had to learn the hard way by making mistakes and getting into trouble and doing the wrong thing. And so, I suppose it was part of my nature, part of my upbringing, my personality.
Yeah, I find that's fascinating. You know, I feel like so many people could have had this similar upbringing, and it leads to such detrimental kind of lives where they get trapped in different kinds of addictions or different kinds of ways of life. And I guess it really is that grace of God where he just said, you are mine, and you just kept calling you towards him. So no, it's pretty special. So I guess going into the philosophy of things, like when you were studying philosophy, what were those people you were reading that were really like challenging the way you thought? Because I remember last night you said, I went in atheist to studying philosophy. I was like, I thought this was going to help me support my thoughts. But then you came out a Catholic. So how did, what was the really challenging people that you came across that made you they were double take on what is life all about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the most influential thinker in my whole journey is Aristotle, because he describes the world as ordered and oriented towards the good. And that was new to me. That was very new to me, coming from a background where I thought everything was random, and you got to decide morality for yourself. There was no such thing as a natural law or this kind of objective morality by any means.
I think, like, when you say that, I always think about when C.S. Lewis says, when I looked at the world, I thought there's no way there could be a God in this world because it seems so unjust. But then he was like, well, where is my idea of just coming from? And he's like, well, there must be this ultimate good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, how do we even have terms like justice and goodness and truth if they're not things we're actually looking at or pointing at in reality? And I think I started to notice that no matter how much I thought I could decide morality for myself, I believed there was an objective reality, and I acted like there was. There were things that I said were right and wrong, even if I didn't want to be that kind of person, I suppose. So the more I just got in tune with my nature as a human person and what Aristotle says about it, we're body and soul, and we're made for virtue and made for the good. That really impacted me.
Did it take a lot of convincing, or was it pretty naturally like, oh, actually, that just makes sense?
It made sense straight away. It didn't take a lot of convincing at all. It took a lot of grappling with, in terms of I didn't want to believe it. It was true. I think I really liked being an atheist. I liked feeling very free.
Did it change your way of life a lot? Or was it kind of not something, was it something that you were naturally kind of tending toward the good in some ways, or was it something that was like, man, you had to stop and be like, actually, I'm going to have to change a lot of my way of life?
Yeah, I was talking to Ben about this morning, actually. It did generate a crisis for me, I would say, of identity. And I had to change. I decided to change the way I was living. I wasn't living in accord with the good, I would say, or with my nature at all. And I wasn't trying to live a virtuous life. I didn't really care about that very much. I just wanted to have fun and be free. So it radically changed how I was living. And there were significant people, particularly at Notre Dame Uni, that kind of supported me in that journey. The chaplain there I became good friends with, and he was supportive of that move, that shift. But also all my friends I made at Notre Dame were basically Catholics and very committed ones. So I
probably have all their prayers to thank.
Yeah, could not be surrounded by it, I think. Yeah.
So I'm guessing you probably met Ben in there somewhere at some stage?
No, I met Ben when I was in high school. When I was in year 10, I went with the friend I mentioned earlier that I made in high school, the Catholic friend. Yeah. They were good friends, Ben and this friend. So she took me to a summer school conference, Catholic conference, and I was curious and I went along and I met Ben there, but nothing. We didn't become anything at that point in time, but we did have good, deep conversations, which I think we both remembered. Yeah.
Interesting. What about you, Ben, in terms of? Thank you, Eliza. That's awesome. I think we'll come back to a lot of that stuff, and it will sort of bridge back into, I guess, where we're going with this. But Ben, for you, kind of growing up, what was clearly you were challenging a lot of thoughts and a lot of things as well, because you were having deep discussions with people like Eliza, even at high school. What was, I guess, how did that come about in yourself? Was it something that came naturally to you, or something that was instilled in you from your family, your upbringing?
Yeah, or you're asking the impossible question, nurture or nature, and it's difficult to discern which of the two it is. I think, as is usually the answer, it was a bit of both. I think that there is a lot of my upbringing that orientated me towards an appreciation for, the faith, but also classical education was definitely steeped in that from an early age. But I think also, it's to a large extent nature as well, because I've got 5 siblings, but I'm the only one who's really, I guess, taken the pathway of doing the liberal arts studies and making that really the main pursuit in my life. So I think a bit of both. I think being brought up surrounded by the Catholic faith and classical education, but also I think an innate proclivity towards appreciating particularly literature. Like I was reading classical literature at quite a young age and have kind of not ever stopped that and that love. I think it was the beauty that I encountered in literature that really to a very large extent was a support or nourishment for my faith, and sometimes I'd be asked by friends of mine who had gone off the rails and had seen me kind of I guess not do so, and they'd ask what's been the support for you, because you seem to not be doing the mistakes that we fall so easily into. And it's interesting to kind of be asked that question, because I don't think it actually derived from any innate kind of sanctity or holiness or even a devoutness on my behalf. I think that it was when we see beauty, that we're inspired to imitate and to emulate. And I think being steeped in the literature that I grew up reading, it really, that more than anything, really motivated me towards trying to live an upright kind of life. Reading the Ten Commandments gives you kind of a rubric of what you should and shouldn't do, but it's not necessarily something you sit around a campfire and just read over the Ten Commandments. Like it's not poetry. It's very true, but it's not something that is poetic. And I think that the virtue that you encounter implicitly in classical literature really, at least for me, to a very large extent, was and still continues to be a very strong motivation for right living, really, I think.
What are some examples, like the Odyssey?
Look, a very significant one for me. When I was 17, I read Les Miserables, and the character of Jean Valjean, I think, is one of the best encounters but one of the best fictional characters I've encountered, who personifies and embodies selfless altruism in a high degree, and so that's characters like that really inspire me with a kind of an archetype of nobility.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how we look at our society now, and much of the education that children are getting, and so much of these books have been stripped from children's education. They no longer see these noble books. And even now, it's fascinating, we see what they're doing to Disney, even to our cartoons. You think with the lowest, I guess, form of that, instilling that nobility within children. And I guess it makes me think about and ponder really the ultimate importance of that in a child's life, of seeing what true nobility is while they grow up. And I think, that I apologize, we actually forgot to note really what you guys do, but Ben and Eliza are the directors, and Ben's the founder of the Augustine Academy in Australia, and they teach high school age children classical education, and they also have a dairy farm. Is it?
Oh, no.
No?
We got 3 Jersey cows. I don't think that qualifies.
3 Jersey cows?
Not
okay.
Quite, no.
Not quite.
What a big dairy farm.
It's a house farm, and so this is what they're teaching. They're making a massive commitment to forming young minds, and so I guess that's really why I think your upbringing is quite important when we're discussing what you're doing now. And coming back to with what you're saying with children's literature or children's movies, I think it's a thing I'm growing more and more increasingly aware of the significance of the narratives that you're exposed to in the formation of your character, because you learn things procedurally before you learn them propositionally. So you learn how to do something before, you learn
how to tie your shoelaces way before you can articulate in language, what you're doing. And I think that narratives provide you that in an archetypal way, the procedural knowledge of right living. And then later on, you might be able to, I guess, crystallize that into some propositional knowledge of saying, well, you shouldn't lie and you should try and be selfless. But way before you can even articulate those concepts, you've learnt them implicitly through exposure to narratives if you've had the opportunity to.
Or even like our dads, it's like, what would dad do? It's not what would dad say, it's what would he have done in the situation.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and with the stories, it's pretty cool because like you see so many little kids, like myself, Lord of the Rings, you've got Aragorn. It's like any kid knows that Aragorn's the best and he's a legend and he's virtuous and he's the guy you want to be like. He's the noble king. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, they all give examples of that classic hero archetype, and Gandalf as well. I mean, he emulates he essentially makes an ultimate sacrifice. He dies and then he's resurrected as a very Christ-like figure, and you see that reoccurring so many times in narratives, and that communicates to the reader, like, oh, well, actually, sacrifice, death, and rebirth, it's not just Christ that does that. We're called to do a Gandalf and sacrifice yourself, and it's through that you're going to transcend yourself.
It's beautiful there. So I guess flowing on from that, Ben, how did this journey now take you from that childhood to then this journey towards starting the Augustine Academy?
Well, I guess you got Campion in between there, right?
True.
Did you go straight from school, or?
Yeah, so because I grew up just on a small cattle farm in West Australia, and it instilled in me this inspiration, as I mentioned earlier, to love classical education, and I was quite committed to wanting to pursue that in a.
Was that your parents?
Well, I love. My dad's a carpenter, so he taught me to love working with my hands. And my mum is more of a bookish type, so she probably is more responsible for the academic interests. But I was really keen to pursue that further, and so there was no liberal arts studies that I could pursue in Perth. The closest one was in Sydney. That was 4,000 k's away, and parents did their best job of trying to dissuade me from such a enterprise as a young lad. But I decided to go with it anyway, and went over to Sydney and spent 3 years studying there. And that was a big life-changing decision. Definitely changed the trajectory of my life.
How old were you?
So I just turned 18. I'd come back from half a year doing mission work in Kenya, and I came back and turned 18 when I was in Kenya, and decided to go into Campion from there. Yeah. So I did the 3 years there, and that was certainly a very formative 3 years. And it was definitely my studies at Campion, as well as the liberal arts studies I did in Canada, were both catalysts for the inspiration for starting up Augustine Academy, which I did in 2016. No, 2016. Yeah, the idea kind of was conceived in September of 2015. Had the idea to start a liberal arts school for high school aged kids, and recognised there's a bit of a need for that. A lot of kids weren't flourishing in the high school environment in Australia, and there was also a large number of homeschoolers who needed a pathway to go into university. So I thought I could really meet that need, and I was passionate about teaching, but was always kind of highly motivated to work for myself. So I thought, I think this is something I could start up, and I was really blessed. It was a really God opened a lot of doors, and
So is this coming straight out of Campion, or is there a bit of a gap?
No, so I went and travelled Europe for about 6 months by myself after studying at Campion, because I'd learnt all the history, or not all, but I'd learnt a lot of the history of Europe and never been to Europe, so I need to rectify that lack. And so it was great. Yeah, very formative again, travelling by yourself. You really can't help but grow in that time. Very big growth in my character then. And then came back and got stuck into a Masters of English Literature at the University of Sydney. And I was 6 months into starting that when I had the idea of starting the school. And I was only 22 at the time, so I called my parents and did the right thing and asked them for advice and said, I think I might start a school, what do you reckon? They were supportive and said, that's a great idea, but finish your Masters and spend the next few years kind of just letting that idea percolate and don't do anything rash because you're just beginning your masters. And I was very respectful and completely disregarded their advice, and
as you do,
decided that we'll just go ahead with it anyway. I was pretty full time commitment at that stage anyway, because I was teaching about 50 high school age kids on a weekly basis.
So did you kind of launch right into it, or was there a bit of a build up?
Well, I guess there was a build up. The previous year, I'd been teaching just in an informal capacity about 50 high school kids, and
just that sort of after school tutoring.
Oh, they're all homeschoolers, so it's just I kind of was. It's typical for homeschoolers in Australia and probably elsewhere to get private tutors, and so I was just another private tutor, and I went to a few different places around New South Wales and teach literature and history and a bit of theology, and that was growing and growing, and I was getting more students. I was spending half my time just in the car driving to the different places, and
so it had almost already started.
Yeah, it kind of started in an informal capacity, and that was great. I was like, okay, right, well, I've got enough students for a school here, but I just need to formalize it, need to get accreditation, get a campus, and maybe have more than one teacher.
Yeah,
and so it was really fortuitous that I'd been doing that before I even had the idea of starting the academy, because then I was already had, I guess, a bit of a reputation amongst the young people in New South Wales as a teacher, and so it was I guess it was an easy sales pitch to say, hey, you've been under my tutorage for the last year, how would you like to have more teachers than just me? And you're going to get some qualifications from your studies.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's the part I'm actually quite fascinated about. You go from 22 years old, you're studying your masters. That's just a year older than me and Tomas, and you go to these parents and you say, hey, will you let me teach your children full time?
Yeah. It was. Yeah. Anyway, can you give me a question?
No, it's. I was just fascinated by it in terms of what was that pitch like? When those conversations you had with parents, were any of them quite hard? You had 50 children, and then your first year at Augustine Academy, you said you had 18.
Yeah. So, I mean, not all of the kids that I taught had been teaching before I started the school were able to come the first year that it opened, because when I started the school, I had it for 16-year-olds and over, and some of my students were younger, so they kind of came.
And obviously they have to come and stay at the school.
Yeah. So it was a big. So
that came later. Yeah, that wasn't.
So they only came. It was originally the school was just 2 days a week, and then we expanded to 3 days, and then we started getting interstate students very quickly, and so we had to make it a boarding school with full time. But it's a good question, Bede. I thought I was a really impressive, professional-looking 22-year-old, but I got told after the students had enrolled, my first impressions of you, Ben, when you rocked up at my parents' house on your skateboard with your messy hair, that you weren't necessarily the image of the standard principal of a school, and I don't know why my parents sent me. Maybe they didn't really care much about me, but yeah, looking back, I guess it was a big step of faith from on the behalf of the parents to send off their kids.
I guess you'd built up the reputation.
Yeah, look, it certainly did help having a couple of years of teaching kids. They already knew of me, and I mustn't have put them off too much with my teaching, because they were quick to sign up. So that certainly that helped a lot.
I think in some ways it's a real credit to the way that you were teaching and communicating with the children that you already had. I know a lot of, especially parents who homeschool, are very discerning parents.
Yes.
They're not parents that just trust very easily. And I think that's really, I guess, a credit to the maturity you must have had already at that age. I couldn't imagine anyone in their right mind trusting me and Tomas with 15.
Well, they kind of did for a weekend already.
Well, that was a retreat, but they knew that those children were going to get messed up. But to teach them for a whole year, that's something, that's something quite extraordinary.
Oh, look, and plenty of adventures and misadventures certainly transpired over the course of the first year that the students came. There would be, because they're all excited to be out of home for the first time. They're like, I'm 16 and off at this boarding school where the principal's only 22. We're going to be able to get away with a lot of stuff. So there's certainly a lot of pranks in the first year. The boys, middle of the night, just built a brick wall in front of the girls' dormitory, so they woke up and had a brick wall in front of their doorway and couldn't get out. And there was certainly a lot of shenanigans, but it was great. And I think that the students appreciated, because I was young, but also probably definitely not just young, but young at heart. And so there was a lot of adventures when you take the students, kayaking down rivers in flood and taking them on adventures and hiking and on a lot of snow trips. And so they loved it. I think that was they really appreciated that the teachers were on board with adventures as well as the academics. And
you were actually a teacher, though. That's what the children had. They had a teacher rather than a facilitator.
Yeah.
And so often, we just, like, I know when I went to school, my teachers, they weren't teachers. They were just facilitators.
Yeah,
here's a book. You go and do the work and come see me at the end of class. Go and make sure you do it. And I think that, there's a massive difference, that a teacher leaves a massive impact in someone's life.
Yeah, I think that's a valid distinction. I think when you look at schools and academies and colleges over the centuries and the ones that have really flourished, I think to a very large extent, there's obviously a lot of factors in that, but I think it's such a positive thing when a teacher can actually have a rapport, a personal rapport with the students, and you're not just and I certainly benefited from that experience studying the different colleges I studied at in Sydney and in Ontario, that I knew the teacher. I think that was a big inspiration. Like I knew, particularly when I was in Canada, I was very good friends with the teachers, and like they'd invite students around for dinner after class, and would be having poetry nights on the fire, and it was just a real friendship that I had with the lecturers at the university in Canada, and that made a significant impression on me. And I was like, okay, well, I also want to, when I'm a teacher, I want to be having a personal rapport with the students that I teach, because I found my experience of learning so much. It's so conducive to my learning experience, having a rapport with my teachers, and so I definitely wanted to emulate that, and it seems that that's been something that has happened, which is great.
Yeah. So I guess first year, it was at 100 days. From this idea hits you in adoration.
Yeah.
You're like, this is what I want to do. You talk to your parents. Did you talk to your parents that night or the next day?
Oh, okay, it was all boom, boom, boom. Like I had the idea, there's a night of adoration, Blessed Sacrament exposed, and complaining to God about wanting to teach at a school that didn't exist, and him telling me to get off my backside and go and start it, and me taking up that challenge, and talking to my parents. And then from there it was pretty quick. I spoke to a principal who I'd gone to a Bible college before going to Campion, and the principal gave me some pointers as to how to get a certificate for in liberal arts accredited in an efficient way. So I took that advice on board, and I was getting the students was relatively easy as discussed. Just talking.
So it was pretty straightforward, sort of, from when you started.
Yeah, like it was helpful that at the time I was a bachelor, because the days were spent either preparing lessons or teaching the kids, or I was still working my masters. I didn't drop that, but there was the days were definitely 18 or 20-hour days of work, and because I really wanted to start. I've got this virtual vice, call it what you will, but as soon as I get an idea, if I think it's a good idea, then I have to act upon it as soon as possible. And so I've now become a consultant in Australia with people that are starting up liberal arts enterprises in different schools, and it's quite amusing, because when I have my consultations with these individuals that are a couple of decades older than me, and they're looking at starting a school, and my first question is, when do you think you'll start? And they say, probably 3 or 4 years down the track, and that's probably a really reasonable answer, but certainly I had to start, or I felt that I had to start 3 months after I had the idea, because life's too short to put off for tomorrow.
I think we're pretty familiar with that attitude.
It's interesting. I didn't think that would be something we'd talk about, but I think that would be cool to talk about that. It's just, like as a man, having that drive. Yeah. You were very much like, this is what God wants me to do. This is what I got to go do. And then you just went for it. And this idea that you're going to do it in 4 months or 4 years or however long. Yeah. The idea of that, you were going to put it off for anything else in the world? Yeah,
it's a great question. And I was reading just a couple of days ago, there's an essay it's an address that C.S. Lewis made towards the beginning of World War II. He makes an address, and it's address of what's the point studying because it was an address to Oxford students. What's the point studying at Oxford where at the brink of war, war is broken out, and there's no certainty of anything anymore. So what's the point continuing on studying in such a tumultuous time? And the argument that I find so compelling that Lewis makes is if we wait for auspicious hour and a convenient time where it seems like now is an appropriate time to start some endeavor. That time will never come, and so you'll never actually achieve something grand and fantastic if you wait for a time that seems like it's auspicious. That time will never arrive, and good things are only great things can only ever be accomplished if you chose to just start and do something now, even though you might seem too young, or you don't have any funding, or you don't have a campus. In my case,
Right.
Yeah, like I didn't have colleagues, I didn't have teachers, I didn't have accreditation, didn't have a campus, didn't have students, didn't have any of the basic things you should have for starting a school. But I decided that, oh, to hell with it, like, I'm not going to let any of those things stop me. And I think that you have to just start now. You can't wait for things to be convenient and fall into place, because that'll just never. There was always a good reason to put off a good idea for tomorrow.
100%.
I think, for me at least, that's incredibly inspiring. When you have a project that God wants you to do, you can't put it off, and you just have to keep going forward and take one step in front of the other. And I think we live in a society where we live in almost inertia.
Yeah.
Where almost nothing occurs, in a sense of just everything kind of like everyone's in a culture of putting everything off.
Yeah.
But it's like today we have to start, and we take that step forward, and it's that same thing. It applies to all things in our life. If when we're grown in virtue, we don't just become that virtuous saint tomorrow.
Yes.
We do it today by taking that little step. And I think that for me at least, when I heard you speak about that last night, and then just hear about you speak it now, it's like this really gets me, I guess, fired up. It's like, man.
Yeah.
It's like taking that step again, and you're that perfect example of when you take that step and God's there with you, you can do, you can move mountains. And
yeah, absolutely. And that wasn't just for myself as well, but for the students, I think, who came. It was maybe a leap of faith for me to start the enterprise with not much as a behind me, but I think it was a leap of faith also for the students, and it was tremendously gratifying to see the fruits of their leap of faith, because there'd be students who came saying, oh, well, like, I don't think I could ever go to university because I just don't think I've got what it takes. And then they came to Augustine Academy, and they'd spend a year there, and they gained a lot of confidence during that year. And then they went on to do a degree at a university, and then actually end up, some of them one particular student who thought he was never going to be able to go to university came to the academy, went on to do a degree afterwards, then came back and taught drama at Augustine Academy. And so it's like he's just done that heroic journey of defying his perceived limitations and really transcending what he thought he was capable of. So.
Yeah, that's super. Yeah, no, that's super inspiring and beautiful. So, I think leading into that first 100 days, you get the school up and running, you get your syllabus all signed off and accredited. When you came and had a chat, obviously with the Australian sort of schooling officials, I guess. Was it? Or who did you get accredited through? Yeah,
so it's a Certificate 4 in liberal arts, which I'm assuming you've got Cert 4s in New Zealand as well. It's like...
Yeah. We have NCA, so slightly different, but yeah.
So Cert 4 in Australia, it's different to what you graduate from if you finish high school. You've got the option of either instead of year 11 and 12, or after you're finishing high school, people in Australia can go and study at TAFE, which is where you get a Certificate 4. So what I did was I didn't want to be limited to the curriculum of year 11, 12 Australian curriculum, because it just wasn't in any way a thing that I wanted to have limiting me, because it was not necessarily forwarding the pedagogy or the truth that I was wanting to teach to the students. So I was wanting to get a fair bit of freedom and scope with what I taught, and as the best way to do that was to get a Certificate 4, which I program, which I could then use for teaching. And there was a pre-existing college that had recognised a training had the RTO status, which is just a registered training organisation, and so we partnershiped with them, and they basically were the people that just backed the accreditation, and so they used their status, and we paid them a fee, and then the accreditation was through there, which was great because it gave us a tremendous amount of scope, because a lot of schools that are trying to do great things are quite hampered by the fact that the Australian education system is not necessarily supporting those truths.
So did you have to get property for the campus?
Yeah, so we first campus was a monastery. It was a 200-year-old beautiful sandstone monastery, and that was lovely. That was really quite an impressive campus. It made us feel like at Cambridge, but it was a short-lived campus because we had a lot of energetic young students, and the monks there, they ran silent retreats for geriatrics, and there was a bit of incompatibility between 80-year-olds trying to have silent retreats and me with my young students having late-night fires and singing and pulling pranks on each other. So we moved from there onto another campus that we rented for 4 years. It was a 40-acre campus.
Did you manage to stay there for a full year, or was it not even a full year?
It was literally, the first campus was a first term kind of 2 or 3 month kind of situation. And then the next campus we rented for 4 years. And then we were really blessed. It was a tremendous blessing from God with some tremendously generous benefactors who really wanted to support the school, and they made some donations which made it possible to buy a 40-acre campus that's halfway between Sydney and Melbourne, and we've been there for the last 5 years, and it's a gorgeous property. It's got 2 rivers running through the campus and surrounded by mountains and national park and a whole lot of wildlife that the students love getting amongst. So
we'll have to stop by on October, Bede.
Yeah, no,
we'll have to try to. Yeah. No, it's funny how you said, we stayed there for 3 months and then we went to another property. We stayed at for 4 years. And I guess, you're probably 8 years down the track, but, even that little interaction of what was it like to be like, okay, we're going to leave this place and go find somewhere else. I guess there would have been a level of providence there.
It was exciting, yeah. My older brother was with me at the time, and when we got told by the monks that there was an incompatibility between young scallywag students and the silent retreats they're trying to run, and we're like, oh, right, well, we've kind of committed to starting this school, and now we thought we had a campus, but we don't, and it's a bit of a commitment then signing up to renting a camp, because we need to rent something quite big, so we need to be renting a campus that was going to cost upward of $1,000 a week, and committing to that when there was no idea how the school was going to go was certainly we were instantly thrown into a bit of chaos. It was quite unexpected, but my brother and I, we were actually both surprised to find that we were quite excited at the turn of event, because it was really, okay, well, this is going to be a big leap of faith. We've got to try and find a new place before the next term begins. Yeah. And we've got a short amount of time to find a fairly tailored kind of campus that's somewhat affordable, and then we've really got to make this first year work, because we've got some, the stakes got a bit higher, and it was, I guess it would have been an easy time to kind of fold up and turn in and say, well, that's it, we've lost the campus. Well, maybe this wasn't meant to be, but God opened some doors and used some reckless servants of his, and my brother and I, we managed to keep going, which is great. It was a really glad that we did.
Did you have a bit of a network to pull on, like from Campion or
look, at the time, no, we didn't have much of a network at the beginning in terms of support. So Campion College has since become super supportive of Augustine Academy, and
guess you'd be a competitor almost.
Well, no, we were very deliberate. They thought initially, to be honest, that we might have been, when I told them. There's an interesting story actually. The relationship with Campion. I told them I was going to start a liberal arts school, and my time at Campion, I was climbing on the roofs of Campion College and always running around barefoot and not necessarily looking like an Oxford scholar. And so when this Ben McCabe approaches them and says, I'm going to start a school, they thought probably, and quite understandably, you're going to ruin the reputation of liberal arts in Australia because you're just a disaster waiting to happen. And so they were a bit apprehensive, and fair enough. Yeah. But then as the years went on, and about half of our cohort each year graduated and went on to study at a Campion College, and the academy graduates did quite well at Campion because they'd had a nice foundation in liberal arts, and so they were one step ahead of a lot of the Campion students who didn't have that immersion in liberal arts. And so as the years went on, that relationship with Campion, it became quite robust, because a third of our intake is from you each year, and they're pretty good.
It's like a gateway drug.
Yeah.
Well, even like looking at your website and stuff, I always got that idea. It's more of like a stepping stone. It's like you're not actually providing what Campion is providing. It's something different.
And it's for a slightly younger demographic. Like the Campion's offering something for the 18s plus kind of demographic, and we usually get the 16, 17-year-olds. So it's a it's a precursor, if anything, which is good. There's no need to be in competition, and we aiming for those high school kids, which is great. And we've got now a fun rivalry, which is not a competition for students, but just a competition for the events that we run. So each year we put on a swing dancing competition, and the students from Augustine compete against camping students in dancing competitions and volleyball competitions, soccer competitions, and ultimate frisbee games. And so we've got a nice rivalry with the sports.
You might be playing again at Augustine Academy next year.
So sharpen up your volleyball skills, because the academy kids will be,
Well, that's awesome. You know, for me, I hear when I listen, I'm like, man, there must have been so many little challenges where you were just forced to trust God, and it's amazing to me. Like you must have such a trust of God, and I think Eliza can probably speak to that a little bit. What's it like being married to this man? Who's like, it clearly is just, you know, like I can tell, you know, I can tell you were probably the man running around bare feet at Campion, and just sort of this free thinker, but just so in love with the Lord. And what's it like being married to him and just being on this journey? Where did you come in on this journey?
Tell me the story. Yeah. You don't know where you're in.
Yeah, look, I don't know if Eliza should answer that question honestly on air.
No, it's a good question. It's short answer. It's the best journey, being married to Ben. I've never met someone who makes decisions so quickly, but things just always seem to work out for Ben too. Like everything just always seems to fall into place. So it's very easy to, I suppose, trust the ideas that Ben has and trust that they'll work out, because they just always seem to. Even if a million things go wrong on the way, we always get there in the end. So he's, kind of my rock, I suppose, in that way. Yeah.
So how did you come back into Ben's life?
Yeah, it was a good question, because, like as Eliza mentioned, I bumped into her for a very brief interval of a 20-minute conversation on a swing when she might have been in year 10, and then we kind of...
Who remembered it? Did you both remember it?
Oh, both remembered. Like, no, you got to remember, Beat. I'm a pretty unforgettable guy. So, no, both remembered it. But the end, for many years would invite Eliza to different social gatherings I was putting on, and she stubbornly refused to have anything to do with me. And it wasn't until she didn't really respond to any invitations, and took that on the chin, all right. But then she got a flat tire, and she needed to go to she was attending a Catholic conference in New South Wales, and happened to be a conference I was giving a lecture series at, and so her friend put me in contact and said, Eliza needs a lift to this conference that you're lecturing at, and I thought, fantastic. I've invited this girl to catch up at different social events for the last few years, and she's just been giving me the cold shoulder. But now
you're the knight in shining armor.
Yeah, 3-hour drive to the conference. This will be perfect. So,
so you obviously you were kind of locking your sights in a little bit even back then.
Oh yeah. As there's not. Growing up, I was a bit of an outsider in terms of I had a love for philosophy and asking philosophical questions, and none of my friends, at least in Western Australia, had the slightest interest in answering them or even talking to me once I asked them. And when I got on the 3-hour drive with Eliza, I was very impressed by her philosophical proclivities and interest in the biggest questions. And she wasn't interested in discussing how nice her nails looked, but was interested in talking about Aristotle's metaphysics, which was a very attractive thing. It was very very lovely to meet somebody who I could have such deep conversations with. So by the end of the 3-hour drive, I was quite forward and asked if she was interested in teaching at Augustine Academy, and she said that she was. And about a week after that, I was out kayaking on the ocean. Went for a sunrise kayak, and I asked her on that morning if she'd be interested in going out with me, and she said yes to that request. And then things continued on from there, and it's a year and a half later we were married, and since then Eliza's been probably the biggest support for me running the academy. I find myself leaning on her more and more as the years go on, and especially like we've got 10-month-old daughter now, so we've got more responsibilities, and the school's growing with getting more students from all across the country, and some New Zealand students next year. And so we've got a lot of lot of things happening, but Eliza's definitely a tremendous support. She just does so much on a practical level with helping me run the school, and I don't know what I'd do without her at this stage. She's really become indispensable in more ways than one.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, as it should be. Just
that's
very complimentary,
equally yoked.
No, it's just great. It's such an honour. I mean, it's a privilege to be able to be in a position to teach, but young people. But then it's even such a great honour to be able to do that side by side. And my wife was saying to her just last night, I feel like I'm on an epic adventure, but doing that with my best friend is like, well, that's just, you can't get better. It's just the best. Like that's the kind of thing I get inspired hearing about, and now I feel I'm just living it. It's great.
Yeah, no, and I think you can see very much so, at least I hope I can see, that the complementarity between you two, it's something pretty special, and just I think it takes a pretty special lady to walk with Ben from the story. Like, it seems like a whirlwind. So
she's good.
So it hasn't always been
both.
complementarity. It's had its bumps and its challenges for sure. Our journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paths converged eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think we appreciate there's a degree of compatibility, and then the difference is ultimately complementary in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess I had one question, which is like, it's kind of, I guess, an ongoing discussion that I sort of had with myself and with Bede as well. Like, people not seeing the value of liberal arts in any way. Definitely, like, I started studying liberal arts here at a university in New Zealand, and it was COVID at the start, so I sort of was forced to cut it off, but I didn't really have a desire to go back because I just didn't see it as very practical at all. And obviously education isn't meant to be practical in that way, but also the education they were offering, I was like, it's not even like proper education. Like, it's just too utilitarian. They just want to give me the papers and stuff. And that's sort of what really attracted me to Campion and stuff. I was like, oh, this is the real deal here.
No, in a massive way.
But like, even like myself and Bede were both sort of working with our hands a lot of the time. We also see that as a super valuable part of life, and I probably wouldn't have wanted to go straight to uni out of school and like never have picked up a shovel or anything,
So what then? You said Campion seemed right. Why did you decide Campion was going to be a fulfillment of that, what you're looking for?
Because I guess it's got the ultimate end in mind, and it's teaching everything holistically and with the faith and like all of the subjects in unison. But I also feel like I'm at a place in my life where I'd sort of more greatly appreciate and make use of that.
And I think there's a big thing to be said. I think that's perhaps one of the better things about the liberal arts is the integration of the subjects, because if you're studying, I guess, if you're at a university and you just handpick random subjects as an arts degree and decide you can study Shakespeare and World War II and then philosophy from antiquity, well, that's just a confused approach to the subjects. But if you're studying them in an integrated fashion and you're looking at, Reformation, England, at the same time as you're looking at Shakespeare, at the same time you might be looking at Descartes, then you've got a bit of a synchronization of disciplines that bear relevance to one another, and you can then go, okay, well, I'm looking at all these things and they all relate to one another, and now I can make more sense of what's happening in each one of those disciplines. So I think it's great to have that. I think that's something that should be stressed more. It's kind of intuitive when you think about, make them all kind of compatible, but it's not always done, which is a shame.
So I guess there's like two questions. Like, do you find that it's a hard sell sometimes talking to people?
No, not really. No. Like there's been a number of adversities in the last 8 years. Recruiting students has never been a challenge. I don't like advertising because that requires being on the computer, and I'm an outdoorsy kind of person, so I try and avoid that if possible. So I perhaps there's lots of good marketing that could be done online, which I just don't do. But I've never needed to, because from the first year that the academy students came, they just were, every year the students who graduate have been my advertisement, because they've told their younger siblings or they've told their friends, and they've just said, hey, last year at Augustine Academy was hands down the best year of my life, and it was just a transformative experience. you absolutely should go. And that's an awesome sales pitch if someone tells their friend or sibling that. If I'm saying that, then people just think I'm trying to sell a product. So I let my students do the advertising for me by just going, well, I'm going to make sure that this year is the best year of your life, and then obviously, then it's up to you. If you decide you want to share your good experience, you can, and then we get students next year. So that's kind of how it's rolled. I haven't gone around. We're getting students from every single state in Australia, and I've not gone around the continent recruiting students.
Right.
We just students have happened to know students from students have friends from other states, and they tell them about it, and then they come, and the numbers grow, which is great.
Yeah.
I think I'll just add to that. I think it becomes challenging trying to pitch the liberal arts to anyone that's not in a Catholic world. I would say I've found this.
Yeah.
Like I think the liberal arts can seem like a very insular, specifically Catholic thing almost.
Right.
A lot of the time. Like in my world, with a lot of my family and friends who don't know Catholicism, they don't know what the liberal arts is. I never had any idea what it was until I started studying philosophy. And not even then, actually. I didn't really know what it was.
Which is crazy because it was the basis of all education for how long.
Well, it is, but because we're so far from it being the basis, people really don't know what it is. So I don't blame
so
them.
you're almost even studying philosophy disconnected from all the other stuff.
Yeah. I didn't hear liberal arts until I met Ben. And I studied philosophy for 2 years before that.
Right.
So it's not promoting it to the world outside a Catholic circle, I think, is really challenging.
Yeah.
Trying to pitch it as something useful and not just kind of this fluffy stuff that you sit around.
Because I think it can definitely be seen that way. But even like at Augustine Academy, and you yourself are like a super outdoorsy guy. Yeah. How are you giving that more sort of balanced approach to students?
Yeah, well, that's a huge thing, and I think a lot of the some of the students come because they're just absolutely in love with classical education. They love the great books, and they want us to come for that. But then there's a lot of students that are really outdoors inclined, and they hear that at the academy they learn to do really practical hands-on stuff, because I grew up on a farm, and so I learned the practical hands-on skills, and I think they're as important. Like you don't want to, and your podcast is all about this, which is awesome. The integration that you don't just want to be a scholar that's academic, but you've got absolutely no idea how to do anything practical with your hands. And you can read Aristotle's metaphysics, but if the door comes off its hinges, you have to call someone in distress because you don't know how to put the hinge back on. That's not I think the ideal. I think the ideal is to have a knowledge, both practical and intellectual. And so I try and give the students the opportunity to develop both, and so we'll
they also inform each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's also what the liberal arts promotes, though. It promotes this holistic person.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny, when I say this now, is listening to you both last night was like, man, maybe I should just do next year at Campion.
Yeah,
so watch this space.
He messaged me last night, and I was like, okay.
But it was because it was the thing of, like, for me, the one thing I always wanted to teach my children, is, if God blesses me with children, is critical thinking above all else.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, okay, I want my children to know that, but I don't think, like, yes, I've had a reasonable education, and I think reasonably critically. Yeah. But I don't think I've had the fundamentals. Like, Eliza said, when I went and started doing philosophy, I had to, like, strip everything back and strip it to, like, water and question everything I do. And I was like, even for me, I'm like, man, this is super important for making me a holistic person. And what is a year out of my life, or what is even 3 years out of my life to make me that person who's, we always talk about it as friends anyway. It's just like doing things that, leisurely things, or like lifting weights, or learning how to fight, or learning how to fish, or do all these, like, or woodworking and all these little creative things. They make you a more holistic person. Yeah. And I think that as a Catholic, we value that. But also, even in the workforce, it makes you so much of you can apply yourself to so many different areas, where a lot of people are becoming very specialized. Yeah. And their skills, they don't really transfer because they don't really have those general skills of critical thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and with that, like, the valid question is that, was it worth spending a year or a couple of years of your life doing something like liberal arts studies when you could just go straight into being specialised? And there's
because I know 2 years ago that's what I was thinking. I was like, it's not worth it.
Yeah, and why not get specialised as soon as you can? Because then you've got the credentials to get a higher paying job, and then you get money, and that's what everyone should be chasing, because then that's stability. But then I think a good question is, well, if I'm going to build the best house that I could possibly build, then maybe devoting a year or a couple of years to putting down the best foundations to that house is perhaps the best long-term solution. And getting your credentials for a job at age 21 or 25 is a negligible difference if those few 4 years of formation in the early years saves you a midlife crisis when you realize you've spent half of your life chasing an illusory goal that is actually ultimately meaningless. So absolutely, putting in, I love the scripture passage here, pursue wisdom without counting the cost, and you'll gain something more precious than silver. It's so true. Like you've got to chase wisdom. You've got to chase right knowledge.
Yeah, and I think it's the other fascinating thing for me, at least I was thinking about, is that, so often secular people go to university, rack up a massive debt.
Yeah.
And they even spend into their 30s of spending all their nights going out drinking and doing these other things, and they got no money. And for me, at least anyway, I always thought, well, I was going to do the opposite of that. I was going to go work hard, build a career, earn money, and save. And by 25, I'd have my own house or whatever, and I would be really well set up. Yeah, and my life is tracking that way if I keep going this way. But for me, it was this thing of like, it clicked. It was like, but am I laying the largest foundation for who God wants me to be?
Yeah.
And I think that's the beautiful thing of what you guys are giving the opportunity for these young people to lay the largest foundation they have, so that when they go and step out in the world, that they've got all this background knowledge, so that when they come in a workplace, they're already leaders in their own way, because they already read what good leadership is. You know, so many people don't even see what good leadership is.
Yeah.
But you've already created that, instilled that in them, that they see what that is.
Yeah.
And I think that those kind of skills that and those ideas that you pick up from the liberal arts allow you to be a critical thinker, allows you to be a good leader, and allows you to be someone who can really influence society in a really positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean it's so worthwhile putting any time, energy, money into something that will ultimately be forming your character in a positive way, because that's like having integrity is like that's going to be something that is invaluable for your life. And as you mentioned, if you're blessed with kids, then you want to be able to endow them with a integrated formation of their own life as well. So it's it's a great thing to be in pursuit of.
I think you've got to fight for that though. Like, you've really got to fight for the value of the liberal arts, because particularly in this day and age, I feel like there's such a fixation on being useful for the economy and not wasting your time. I'm definitely being told many times that I'm wasting my time, or why am I studying what I'm studying, kind of thing. But I wouldn't want to be in any discipline or any career without what I've learnt. I wouldn't make a good lawyer, doctor, whatever if I hadn't learnt the skills I've learnt studying liberal arts. I'd be half the person I am, for sure. Yeah,
I think that was really shown through in COVID, wasn't it? Surely, we were unable to really critically judge ideas for themselves, and
absolutely,
and we kind of came over this thing of, well, if you're not a doctor, you've got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah,
and if you've got other thoughts, then you're clearly thinking the wrong thing.
Yeah, you only have to read Animal Farm, which I'll be teaching to the students in a couple of weeks, and that's such a it's an insightful book to read, but certainly in recent years it becomes even more interesting, because you read Animal Farm and you're in a similar situation. Okay, so King David is told by I think it's Nathan, who says, there's this man who's stolen a sheep, and what crime is that? And David's like, oh, that person deserves to die. And then he's told that he is that man. The whole parable, he's stolen another man's wife, and he's recognizes his errors by that narrative. And I think you read Animal Farm and you think, oh, how awfully stupid are these sheep to just believe anything that the pigs have told them. Like, how can these characters be so dumb? And then you realize, oh, well, actually, maybe that's us all through COVID, just believing whatever the pigs have told us.
Yeah.
It's a pretty funny story, but you think, oh, it's just a joke. That's not how it happens in real life.
Yeah, and then you realize, oh, actually, we got, if someone wears a white coat and says they're a medical expert, then of course they're telling the truth. Yeah. So it's
yeah. Right. Well, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. But hopefully we can start to line up maybe some online ones.
Yeah,
because I would love to get into maybe a bit more of what you kind of teach at Augustine.
Yeah,
and really for the New Zealand listeners, because hopefully more and more Kiwis will go over.
Yeah,
and attend your guys' school, and then hopefully go on to Campion as well.
Yeah,
and I think this is quite a good platform for being able to at least give someone a bit of an in-look without you guys having to come over. But it'd be cool to have you over every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
I look forward to seeing both of you at Campion next year.
Yeah.
God willing, we'll see. We'll see.
We'll see. Well, we're doing Christus Rex, so we'll definitely try and pop by if we can.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, God bless you guys. Right, let's end with a Hail Mary. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Once again, thank you again for Ben and Eliza coming. We really appreciate it. So thank you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, look forward to more.
I just had one question. What do you have patron saints other than Saint Augustine, or maybe?
Yeah, like obviously Augustine of Hippo, he's a champion. Growing up I was always quite fond of Saint Francis of Assisi, but I think in recent years JP2, he's definitely been probably both my wife and I's real champion saint.
And Saint Edith Stein as well.
Yeah.
For sure.
She's awesome. Silence to the cross.
Yeah, no, they're great.
Right. Incredible stuff. We'll be praying for the whole endeavour anyway.
Thank you.
Excited to see what's going to happen, man.
Yeah. Excited to see what happens with liberal arts in New Zealand as well,
Absolutely.
Who knows, we might have Augustine Academy in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, look, if it can be started by someone like myself, then there's definitely someone over here that can start it for sure.
That's beautiful.
Thanks, guys.
Right,
cheers. God bless you.
Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. Yeah, who questioning the flow? Step in the mind, it's a war zone. Step in the booth, I'll go low, cold motive. I run you over, my words explosive. So fly, I wonder what the ground's for. Going up levels, everyone stuck on the ground floor. See myself above, but like downfall. Vision locked on course. Boom, boom, hit 'em with the cold evidence. You know the flow is venomous, it's pretty evident. Vroom, vroom, drop by like the president. Put you in retirement like you're David Letterman. I'm full of adrenaline, lights off in my head again. I'm bending all these beats and melodies. A rare specimen, a real gentleman. Keep it genuine, say what I know and keep that down low.